This is the Chuck Smith Show on Cape Atlantic Live, giving you the latest news on all things Mainland Regional Football. Now here's your host, Nick Kosko, and Mustangs head coach, Chuck Smith.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Chuck Smith Show right here on Cape Atlantic Live, presented by Ulmer's Appliance Service. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. With me, of course, as he will be every week, is Mainland head coach Chuck Smith. And before we get started, just want to remind you that the Chuck Smith Show is also brought to you by Charlie's Bar and Restaurant, The Docks Place, Orio's Bar and Grill, Shore Orthopedic, Golden Nugget, Atlantic City Casino, Hotel and Marina, Edmunds GovTech, and Darcy Johnson Day Law Firm. Coach, pleased to be with you as always, looking ahead to Friday night's game against Oakcrest, where you guys are back at the Corral. So right now, 2-0 for you guys on the season, 2 dominant wins to start out, including over the rival Ocean City this past Friday. So just take me through these past couple of weeks, battle the beach win, beating Ocean City. What's that been like for your team so far to start here in 2023?
Yeah, Nick, we got off to a good start so far. It's always an honor to be invited to the Battle of the Beach and be the first game in the state to start that off, and to play a really tough Washington Township team. They had a lot of good players out there. It took us a little bit to get going, but the kids responded, played well. Our defense played well, and then got through that with a victory. And then, of course, right away you're right into your biggest rival of the season. And usually that game was later in past years. Now it's right up in the front of the schedule. And it was, I think the kids did a great job of focusing on Washington Township week 1, not looking ahead at what was in week 2, which is hard to do with the kids sometimes, but they did a nice job of it. And then coming out of the gates right away against Ocean City and, having another dominant performance, especially on our defense. Our defense has played outstanding the first 2 weeks of the season. I think they've only allowed something like an average of 100 yards per game, giving up, and a shutout in one game, and came close to having a shutout in the first game. And the offense has gotten going too. A lot of guys spreading the ball around, whether running the ball or passing the ball. And we got a little bit more into the passing game last week against Ocean City, but the kids have done well coming out of the gates.
No doubt at all. 2-0, as we just mentioned, with victories over Washington Township and Ocean City. Oakcrest is this week on Friday. Of course, we're on Cape Atlantic Live, 6 p.m. kickoff. You just mentioned the offense, and you did a good job of spreading the ball around and getting more into the passing game. So we'll get into quarterback John Franchini in a second. But the running back depth, I think, is what everyone's looking at this year, considering Jabril Mace is now over at Villanova. He was your star running back for the past few years. But Stephen Ordilli, Cohen Cook, and Rocco DiBiaso, those guys have been basically almost splitting the load evenly, all finding the end zone, all finding big runs over the first 2 weeks. I mean, have you been able to balance that offensive attack with those 3 guys? And what can you say about those 3 guys? As it looks like no one can really stop any of them.
They're great kids, and they've really bought into it. Our offensive system, the spread wing T, and it's running back by committee. It's whatever the defense is giving us, we take. Nobody gets disgruntled that they're not getting enough touches. One game, I think Cohen Cook in the first game, I think only had 4 carries, and Steven had to load that game. And last game, Rocco had a lot of touches and so forth. And then behind that, we have a couple sophomores that have been filling in with Liam Kennedy and Jake Blum, so we really have a 5 running back rotation back there because those guys also play on defense. So it's great to have that depth and be able to keep people fresh on both sides of the football.
No doubt. So John Franchini, speaking of the passing game now, his stats obviously don't jump off the page quite yet, but he seems like he's more comfortable back there in the pocket, a little bit more poised this year. Obviously, he is growing. Freshman starting quarterback last year, now a sophomore, still has lots of room to grow in high school and throughout this system here at Mainland. What can you say about him over the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think he had a little bit of a rough go in the first game. Looked a little uneasy, unsettled in there. We didn't really throw the ball a lot in that first game. But I know he learned from it because there's a couple times maybe he shouldn't have thrown the ball or thrown the ball away or ran with the ball. He's only a sophomore still. He's still learning. And then in game 2 last week, he had one of his best games I think he's had since he's been a Mustang. At one point in the game, I think he was 10 for 11 passing. I think he wound up 12 for 15 overall for 144 yards and a touchdown pass in there. And was really effective in the pocket, hitting the open receiver. Was smart with the football last week. I hope that's a trend he continues, and I'm sure it will be.
Now, with that type of trend, and then obviously you're not giving anything away right here, but because you guys have been so run-oriented over the past couple of years based on your system, based on guys like Jabril Mace that you've had in the past, and you're running back by committee this year, But if his passing game just continually improves, do you see you guys maybe airing it out more against maybe the tougher teams, or a team that maybe will give you more, considering they'll probably stack the box against the running backs?
Well, yeah, it gives you more options on the offense when you're able to throw the ball. If you can't throw the ball, then you're in trouble, because everybody will stack the box and eventually things get taken away from you. But, in the big games and even against any other opponent, you really have to be effective when you're throwing the football, efficient. And, when we play those big games, whether it's in the playoffs or the Hamiltons and the Atlantic Cities, teams are all coming down the road here. You got to be able to throw the ball because, teams are going to want to take away our running game. That's our bread and butter. And we have to have an answer for that, that was really effective for us at times last season, some key passes, play action, things like that. And we just have to continue to get better at that part of our football game.
So flipping over to the defensive side of things for you guys, and then we'll look ahead to Oakcrest on Friday. Hunter Watson, J.J. Sinclair. I mean, you can name pretty much your entire defense. Everyone's racking up tackles. Obviously, you had the shutout last week. Nearly had that shutout in at week 0. We'll call it, of course, a Battle of the Beach. But I'm looking at Hunter Watson just to kind of single him out right now. I mean, he is huge. He looks like a man amongst boys out there. Multiple sacks for the tackles for loss for all these guys. And what can you say about the performance of those guys on defense so far?
Yeah, our defense has played outstanding. It's a tribute to our defensive coaches, really. Coach Tim Watson's our defensive coordinator. Antoine Lowe's coaches our defensive line. Clyde Folsom, Andrew Monroe do our linebackers. Billy Kern and Andre Clements do our secondary with Ed Rupert. And, they really – I think the thing that they do the best is they really – pump up our defensive practices to make it harder than what the game will be. So when they get to the game, it seems a little bit easier, not as fast. And there's a lot of emphasis on that in our practices, our defensive practices especially. And it shows on the field. We're going into the season, one of our things that we were kind of had a question mark about because we graduated all 3 was our defensive line. And so far this season, the guys have played outstanding, especially Dan DeFeo, who plays on the offensive line, but he also plays nose guard for us. So he's been outstanding at there. And they also do kind of a rotation there. Coach Lewis does a great job of rotating 5 guys playing 3 positions there, and they've done a great job. But then you add in Hunter Watson and Cohen Cook on the outside, and Hunter's one of those guys. He plays with a high energy, very quiet young man off the field, but on the field, he's just relentless. And he's one of those guys that you could pretty much see as the season's going already in 2 weeks, he's checking every defensive category, which, not a lot of defensive guys get a check mark in every single box along the line. And he's one of those guys. And of course, we have Stephen Rodilli, who's a 4-year starter in the secondary, which is like having another coach out there, really. And J.J. Sinclair's been a 4-year starter at linebacker for us. And, the guys, they have great chemistry on the defense and a lot of pride in what they do, and that was evident last week when Ocean City drove the ball down after we had scored. And it was their second possession. They broke a big run, got down into the red zone. We stuffed them on first down, and second down looked like they were going into the end zone. Our sophomore safety, Liam Kennedy, came up, made a big stick on the running back, fumbled the ball. Cohen Cook recovered it in the end zone. And that was as close as they really got to the end zone again, because the guys really take a lot of pride in it.
I can definitely see why you guys are known as one of the more physical teams in all of South Jersey, dating back to, the past couple of years, and these guys have been able to develop along the way. So looking ahead at Oakcrest and keeping it on the defensive side of things for you guys. So Oakcrest does have some really tough athletes. Quarterback Marcus Lee is a dual threat. Zachary Forrest at the wide receiver, one of the more dynamic playmakers among the Cape Atlantic teams as well. So basically, again, we're not asking for game plans out here, but how do you defend 2 guys like that? Because obviously Oakcrest has been up and down through the first 2 weeks, but they have shown in the past that, if Lee connects with Forrest, I mean, they're one of the more dangerous combos here in South Jersey. Yeah,
they're a scary team. When you look at them from a defensive standpoint, I mean, they have a lot of skilled athletes with the Forrest kid and Mahmoud. And the quarterback, he has time. He can throw the ball, man. He can wing it around. He's scrambler out there, makes plays happen. They're dangerous. We have our hands full with their passing game this week. We truly do. And I know it's a big concern for us going into this game because, you give them a little bit of room and, you don't make a tackle and those guys can go to distance. A 5-yard play can go 55 yards in a heartbeat. And, we have to really play a sound defensive game, get a good pass rush on them and make tackles in the open field.
And the same goes for their defensive end of things as well. A lot of speed in the back end, but their defensive line's what stood out to me so far through 2 weeks. And I know they didn't win last week over Middle Township, lost 7-0, but Oakcrest does come firing on defense. The defensive line, if I tallied it correctly, 8 sacks over the last 2 weeks. So obviously they can get into the backfield, really disrupt the passing game. What does your offensive line have to do maybe a little bit differently this week to make sure they don't let those guys get through to quarterback John Franchini?
Yeah, we have to do a great job up front blocking, really. They played Oakcrest played a pretty good defensive game against Vineland in week 1. Last week, even against Middle, even though they lost the game, that game was 7-0. That was an interception return. They really stopped Middle. Middle kind of moved the ball here and there, but when they got to the red zone, Oakcrest really tightened up and didn't let them score in there. So it's a tribute to their defense. And they have an outstanding middle linebacker who's a sophomore, number 44, who has a high energy motor, and he covers the field from sideline to sideline. We know we really have to account for him in our game planning this week. But they're always tough. Oakcrest is always tough, and you're always weary of a team coming off a loss. We know we're a big one on their schedule. Being a bigger group size is big for the playoffs for them. And we won decidedly last year, but that was last year to us. So they have some revenge coming over here to Mainland this week.
No doubt. Number 44 you're referencing is Donovan Linthicum, their outside linebacker. Only a sophomore and 27 tackles already through the first 2 games, including 3 in the backfield and a sack to go along with that. So be sure to watch out for him when you guys tune into the game on Friday. So just a couple more for you, Coach, before we let you go ahead of Friday's game on Cape Atlantic Live against Oakcrest. Of course, at the Corral, Mustangs are hosting. The rankings are out, so a lot of services out there. NJ.com, obviously, us, consider you a great football team down here as well. So you name the ranking service, you name the polls, whatever you want to call it. Mainland is way up there. You guys are along with the Millvilles, who were state champs last year, obviously in the same playoff group as you guys as well. Is that hype infiltrating a little bit into the program, knowing what you guys did last year, or is it just like, 2022 was 2022 and we're only 2-0 this year? We still have more work to do here in 23.
Yeah, at our very first team meeting for the season, we addressed the 22 season and we closed the book. That's behind us. We learned from it, and the taste from the Millville game, like I said previously, kind of is carrying us through this season. It's kind of that itch we can't get rid of right now. But nobody's said anything about rankings. Nobody cares right now. We don't care. I don't even pay attention to that stuff. And I know the kids really don't. It's neat to be recognized. Don't get me wrong. They think that highly of you. But the thing is, you got to go out there and prove it every week. We know people are coming for us this year, so we just got to take care of business 1 week at a time.
So looking ahead to Friday, one more for you. You mentioned the heat actually before we came on about the practice times for you guys. It is hot out there today as we record this on Wednesday. Looking ahead to Friday, a high of 88 degrees. You guys prepare for the heat. Obviously, that was a big thing over at Battle of the Beach in Ocean City that first weekend, where a lot of cramping issues. I mean, I'm actually very curious about this because I feel like every coach addresses this, but then sometimes it's almost inevitable, or it just happens. Have you addressed the heat and the weather being a factor on Friday as well on when you guys host on Friday night?
Yeah, we kind of our team does a good job, and our coaching staff does a great job of educating the boys on how to take care of their body properly. I mean, we're very big on hydration. I mean, our kids walk around school with gallon jugs of water all the time. We're not very popular with the teachers when you got to go to the bathroom all the time, but it is what it is. But our kids are very big on taking care of their bodies during the week to prepare them for Friday nights. This is one of those things early in the season. It always happens with cramping. It's just inevitable, it seems, and I think a lot of it is, we don't get to practice the way we used to practice in the old days, where you really were out there in the heat and so forth, and you kind of got a little bit more used to it. Now today, with all the different regulations you have and time limits and constraints and stuff like that, it's a little bit more difficult when the body has to perform to be able to react like that sometimes. This week's been difficult because of the state regulations with the wet bulb tests and so forth. So we tried to make sure we were getting practice. Like this morning, we were on the field at 5:30 a.m. Practice, it was still dark out. We were practicing in the dark till I think 6:15 in the morning. We had the lights on and everything on the practice field, but just to get out there and get work done. The previous day we were inside a little bit. Tomorrow we plan on being outside, but we'll be under certain constraints and so forth. It's just one of those things you got to deal with at this time of the year, and hopefully it's over within the next week or two.
Yeah, I can even remember going back to my high school days over 10 years ago now at this point, the old school 2-a-days for about a week and a half, 2 weeks in August. You're practicing in the morning, get a lift in the middle, a little lunch, and then you get that second practice in at about 3:00 in the afternoon. And it certainly has changed with the new rule set, but hopefully you guys are ready. Hopefully no cramping issues for either you guys or Oakcrest on Friday. Yep. So make sure to catch that game at 6:00 on Cape Atlantic Live right on our YouTube channel as Mainland hosts Oakcrest. I'll be on the call as usual. Coach, appreciate the time as always. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Friday and, of course, doing this again next week.
Sounds good, Nick. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Head coach Chuck Smith right here on the Chuck Smith Show right here on Cape Atlantic Live.